he would have remained just what his father was, a successful epicier, very clean, very accurate, very honest, and on holidays he would have gone out with Madame Leblanc and her knitting in a punt with a jar of something gentle, and have sat under a large, reasonable, green-lined umbrella, and fished very nearly and successfully for gudgeon. The President and the Japanese Prince in spectacles protested together. "If I do him an injustice," said the King, "it is only because I want to elucidate my argument. I want to make it clear how small are men in days, and how great is man in comparison." Section 4. So it was King Egbert talked at Brissago after they had proclaimed the unity of the world. Every evening after that, the assembly dined together and talked at their ease, and grew accustomed to each other and sharpened each other's ideas, and every day they worked together, and really for a time believed they were inventing a new government for the world. They discussed a constitution. But there were matters needing attention too urgently to wait for any constitution. They attended to these incidentally. The constitution it was that waited. It was presently found convenient to keep the constitution waiting indefinitely, as King Egbert had foreseen, and meanwhile, with an increasing self-confidence, that council went on governing. On this first evening of all the council's gatherings, after King Egbert had talked for a long time, and drunken and praised very abundantly the simple red wine of the country that Leblanc had procured for them, he fathered about him a group of congenial spirits, and fell into a discourse upon simplicity, praising it above all things, and declaring that the ultimate aim of art, religion, philosophy, and science alike was to simplify. He instanced himself as a devotee to simplicity, and Leblanc he instanced as a crowning instance of the splendor of this quality. Upon that they all agreed. When at last the company about the tables broke up, the King found himself brimming over with a peculiar affection and admiration for Leblanc. He made his way to him and drew him aside, and broached what he declared was a small matter. There was, he said, a certain order in his gift that, unlike all the other orders and decorations in the world, had never been corrupted. It was reserved for elderly men of supreme distinction, the acuteness of whose gifts was already touched to mellowness, and it had included the greatest names of every age, so far as the advisers of his family had been to ascertain them. At present, the King admitted, these matters of stars and badges were rather obscured by more urgent affairs. For his own part, he had never set any value upon them at all. But a time might come, when they would be at last interesting, and in short, he wished to confer the Order of Merit upon Leblanc. His sole motive in doing so, he added, was his strong desire to signalize his personal esteem. He laid his hand upon the Frenchman's shoulder as he said these things, with an almost brotherly affection. Leblanc received this proposal with a modest confusion that greatly enhanced the King's opinion of his admirable simplicity. He pointed out that eager as he was to snatch at the proffered distinction, it might at the present stage appear invidious, and he therefore suggested that the conferring of it should be postponed, until it could be made the crown and conclusion of his services. The King was unable to shake this resolution, and the two men parted with expressions of mutual esteem. The King then summoned Firmin in order to make a short note of a number of things that he had said during the day, but after about 20 minutes' work, the sweet sleepiness of the mountain air overcame him, and he dismissed Fearman, and went to bed and fell asleep at once, and slept with extreme satisfaction. He had an active, agreeable day. Section 5. The establishment of the new order that was thus so humanly begun, was, if one measures it by the standard of any preceding age, a rapid progress. The fighting spirit of the world was exhausted. Only here or there did fierceness linger. For long decades the combative side in human affairs had been monstrously exaggerated by the accidents of political separation. This now became luminously plain. An enormous proportion of the force that sustained armaments had been nothing more aggressive than the fear of war and warlike neighbors. It is doubtful if any large section of the men actually enlisted for fighting ever at any time really hungered and thirsted for bloodshed and danger. That kind of appetite was probably never very strong in the species after the savage stage was passed. The army was a profession, in which killing had become a disagreeable possibility rather than an eventful certainty. If one reads the old newspapers and periodicals of that time, which did so much to keep militarism alive, one finds very little about glory and adventure and a constant harping on the disagreeableness of invasion and subjugation. In one word, militarism was funk. The belligerent resolution of the armed Europe of the 20th century was the resolution of a fiercely frightened sheep to plunge. And now that its weapons were exploding in its hands, Europe was only too eager to drop them, and abandon this fancied refuge of violence. For a time the whole world had been shocked into frankness. Nearly all the clever people who had hitherto sustained the ancient belligerent separations had now been brought to realize the need for simplicity of attitude and openness of mind. And in this atmosphere of moral renaissance, there was little attempt to get negotiable advantages out of resistance to the new order. Human beings are foolish enough to doubt, but few have stopped to haggle in a fire escape. The council had its way with them. The band of "patriots" who seized the laboratories and arsenal just outside Osaka, and tried to rouse Japan to revolt against inclusion in the Republic of Mankind, found they had miscalculated the national pride, and met the swift vengeance of their own countrymen. That fight in the arsenal was a vivid incident in this closing chapter of the history of war. To the last the "patriots" were undecided whether, in the event of a defeat, they would explode their supply of atomic bombs or not. They were fighting with swords outside the iridium doors, and the moderates of their number were at bay and on the verge of destruction. Only 10, indeed, remained unwounded when the Republicans burst in to the rescue.